Meetings will take place live on the internet. The meeting will be recorded for future viewing. It will assist the participants speak when invited. All people should mute the microphones and turn off their video feed when they're not speaking. Members of the public are welcome to view the proceedings but should not make contributions at this meeting unless invited to do so. Please remember to unmute your microphone and switch on your video feed when it's your turn to speak. Speak clearly and slowly into the microphone, and anyone wishing to speak should indicate using the raise your hand button, and I'll invite people to speak at the appropriate time. The raise your hand icon should also be used for assent should voting be required. Ask for everyone's patience with the use of the technology, and I apologise in advance if we experience any unforeseen difficulties. Okay then, folks, on to and I'll just try and get you all back on. There we go. On to agenda item 1. Apologies for the meeting. Any apologies?
None received, Leader.
Okay, thank you. Number 2, to report any changes in representation of opposition group members. I don't know why we have this on, because as we did in opposition, everybody turns up if they've got something that's their particular brief. But are there any recorded?
None, Leader.
Okay, thank you. Number 3, to receive any declarations of interest under the Members' Code of Conduct.
None.
Okay, thank
None
you.
noted, Leader.
Number 5, number 4, to confirm and sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of September 2020 as a correct record. Is it your wish?
Yes, Leader.
I've got a hand raised, Councillor Zada.
Yes, my apologies, Leader. I wanted to declare an interest in any health-related matters due to my employment with the Trust.
Okay, thank you, Ken. I was wondering whether you're on, because I was waiting for you to come and express that interest, but thank you. Is it your wish that I sign the minutes?
Yes, Leader.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, colleagues. Agenda item 5, capital programme monitoring, pages 1 to 14. Colleagues have read the report in advance. Do you have any contributions, questions, or comments? Sorry, I had the mic off there. Councillor Sue Ridney. Sue?
Hang on. Thank you. Just paragraph 6, please. The Black Country Blue Network 2. I noticed Cosley is listed. It's nice to see Cosley listed. Thank you very much. I would like to know. I'd like to have a bit more information about it, if that's possible, Councillor Harley. I haven't seen anything about it, but I'd like to just have a bit more information pertaining to Cosley, really, Cannon Drive, because as most people will know, Cannon Drive is one of my passions to get something done about that area down there. So I'd really like to have some more information, if that's possible, please.
Absolutely, Sue. Can the relevant officer make sure that, in fact, certainly Sue Ridney gets a briefing, but also if we can get one to all 3 ward members, that would be good. I've got Vicky with a hand up from Planning and Region.
Yeah, just to confirm that we'll make sure that Councillor Ridney and the ward members get that information. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Is that okay, Sue?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other hands raised, so is that report agreed?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. On to agenda item 6, revenue monitoring 2020 to 21, pages 15 to 25. I'll hand over to Steve Clark and Ian Newman.
Thank you, Leader. Can you hear me all right? Because I'm having a problem with my camera.
Perfectly clear.
Great. So this report gives a further updated financial forecast for the year 2020-21. It's set against the background of COVID-19. Our forecast is a best estimate in the light of the uncertainty about the path of the virus, the nature and duration of public health measures, and the severity of the economic impacts. Taking into account the COVID-19 grant we expect to receive, the in-year impacts on services and other underlying financial pressures, our forecast shows a technical surplus of 2.6 million in the current year. Now, this does not include the additional 3.9 million of unring-fenced funding allocated to Dudley on October the 22nd. However, this technical surplus is only shown because we are allowed to spread the impact of council tax and business rate losses. Our working estimate is a shortfall of almost 10 million, but this can be accounted for over 3 years. We recognise that some financial impacts will carry on beyond this year, and the level of our government grant in future years is uncertain. We will know a lot more after the comprehensive spending review later in the autumn. Our historic low tax, low spend and low reserves make these challenges all the greater. We know that if we do not receive more ongoing financial support, very difficult decisions will be needed. So we'll carry on calling for that support to our government. We will report to Cabinet again in December when we know more about our future funding. I move the report's recommendations, Leader.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Any comments, questions? Okay, Councillor Peatlow. Peter?
Thank you very much, Leader, and thank you very much for that introduction, Steve. I'll start my contribution off, if I may, with your final remarks, just so that you can plan to come back to me, because that's what I was going to finish off my contribution with. You make the point with regard to representations to government with regard to the settlement. Would it be possible to send me any copies of the correspondence entered into in the spirit of openness and transparency, so we can have a look at that? Additionally, and linked to that, there's a question with regard to the recent Institute of Financial Studies review that has outlined twofold, really. One, a further £5.3 billion cut to local government. And again, the question is, what representations, if any, have been made on behalf of Dudley to the government, and may I have sight of those copies? And finally, it's also thought by the LGA that rather than have a 3-year medium-term financial strategy, the government may conclude to have just a 1-year medium-term financial strategy, which obviously just covers 1 year instead of 3. What representations, if any, have been made by yourself, Steve, and could I have sight of that correspondence? And finally, what is the view of Dudley Council with regard to a 1-year settlement or a 3-year settlement? And I raise those points, Steve, really as way of introduction, because as you can imagine, I'm relatively shocked to have agenda item number 6 this evening and the revenue monitoring, because it's an unprecedented report, and obviously what we want to ensure is that there is no dither or delay by the current administration with allowing people the opportunity to scrutinise medium-term financial strategy. I refer to page 16, Steve, paragraph 7, bullet point 1. This states this does not include pressures on business rates and council tax income. See collection fund below. If this paragraph had been relevant on the 27th of October.
Sorry, Pete, could you just say that paragraph again? Which one was it?
Yes,
please?
certainly. It's page 16.
Yeah.
Paragraph 7, bullet point 1, last sentence. And
Okay,
it talks about the financial pressures. The point I'm saying is, if this had formed, if we'd have taken ourselves back to the 27th of October 2010, this would have been part of the medium-term financial strategy, and then this would enter the scrutiny process for November, December, January, before coming back to Cabinet in February and then to full council. Why the same time not being given for scrutiny in 2020? Bullet point 2, there are pressures arising from children looked after placements totaling £3.3 million. Now, I'm going to be conscious not to go into too many of the political issues affecting our young people at the moment, but I would like to take us back to the 13th of October 2011 and the Cabinet meeting agenda item 5, the medium-term financial strategy, which the ruling group at the time put forward to allow scrutiny to take place in November, December, January and February. Why was it good enough in 2011 but not good enough in 2020? Why the diver? Why the delay? Bullet point 3, Steve, which outlines a really important point with regard to the cost pressures of £1.3 million within the home to school transport. Now, if that had been relevant on the 31st of October 2012, that would have been presented to Cabinet under agenda item 5, and then it would have allowed the whole of November, the whole of December and the whole of January in order for the scrutiny committee, for interested parties to look at the proposals, to make amendments, to suggest suggestions in order before we came back to Cabinet in the February and then on to full council. If it was good enough in 2012, why is it not good enough in 2020? The final bullet point on paragraph 7 on page 16, Steve, talks about the settled nationally, the pay award of 2.75%. Now, you've presented quite rightly papers earlier on this year with regard to contingency plans for a 2% pay award. Obviously, this leads to an additional 1%. If this was the 30th of October 2013 at the Cabinet meeting, this would have been part of agenda item 5 and would have formed part of the medium-term financial strategy, thus allowing trade unions and interested groups throughout November, December and January to make representations through an open and transparent consultation process. If it was good enough in 2013, why is it not good enough in 2020? And then, Steve, if we move on to page 17, agenda item 11, and he starts talking about the reserves, and you pointed on this a little bit during the process. It's expected to fall by £6.7 million in the year. I'll fast forward and be getting up to date now. On the 29th of October 2014, under agenda item 5, the medium-term financial strategy talked about the levels of reserves. Those reserves were then open to full, open and transparent consultation through scrutiny during the months of November, December, January, before coming back to Cabinet in February and then on to full council. Why the diver? Why the delay in 2020? Same page, Steve, item paragraph number 12. This is a really interesting one, and I would certainly welcome the opportunity to scrutinise this, because I recognise the 45.2 million in relation to business rates around the Section 31 grant, but I'm relatively certain that businesses would welcome the opportunity to be able to scrutinise throughout the months of November, December and January in exactly the same way they would have been on the 28th of October 2015 under agenda item 5, the medium-term financial strategy. I'm fast forwarding, Steve, onto page 18 now and paragraph 14. It looks about the forecast deficit of £5.4 million. We would welcome the opportunity for the months of November, December and January to be able to scrutinise that alongside members in our community, appropriate businesses, appropriate community groups, in order to be able to have a judgment as to where that deficit comes from, and indeed to be able to make helpful suggestions. That is what an open and transparent leadership looks like. What we're seeing here is, no doubt, you're picking up the theme, is an administration who's got a fantastic art in the skills of diver and delay. Paragraph 16 on the same page, on page 18, talks about the deficit of £4.5 million. If that had been applicable in 2017, Steve, as you know, on the 26th of October, under agenda item 5, that would have come as part of the medium-term financial strategy. And then throughout the whole months of November, December and January, the people would have the opportunity to have a say. If it was good enough in 2016, why is it not good enough in 2020? Diver and delay. I'll move on to paragraph 19, still on page 18, that it talks about the general fund will not be called upon this year, but it could happen as early as next year. And I've heard rumours with regard to the potential of a 114 notice if things do not go the way that we would hope. Of course, if this had been either the 26th of October 17, the 25th of October 18, or indeed the 31st of October 2019, each cabinet would have had agenda item 5, with the exception of October 19, when for some reason it was agenda item 6. But the importance was it opened up scrutiny through the full months of November, December and January, and then was reported back to Cabinet in February before going to full council. The point that I'm making, Steve, and obviously the reason I'm asking you the questions is it's very clearly a political report rather than just a officer's report, is what have you got to be frightened of? Why the deliberate diver, and why the deliberate delay? What are you hiding from the businesses of Dudley? What are you hiding from the people of Dudley? What are you hiding from the scrutiny committees of Dudley that we do not know? It's important for a confident administration that they would actually look towards positive feedback from opposition and from other members within their own group. What we are seeing here is an administration that unfortunately is hiding behind its own paperwork, is deliberately differing and delaying, and is a very epitome of an untransparent and a not open administration. So Steve, hopefully you've got those points. I'm more than happy to put them in writing or take you back to the historic months of October in each and every year, as long far back as I can go.
Oh, please don't.
When the medium-term financial strategy has been put forward in the month of October to allow meaningful consultation, rather than our finish here, Steve, a sham report as part of a sham document that is actually saying nothing to the people of Dudley about what will happen to the financial situation in the future. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you for that,
Okay.
Pete.
Yeah, sorry, Steve, just asking you to come back on those points.
Yeah, well, I'd be delighted. I'd like to take the points that he made about 2011, 2012, 2013, 15 and 17. Pete wanted to know the difference between the medium to financial term strategy then and the scrutiny process and now. And the difference is that we've got a pandemic. No one saw this coming. The reason we haven't had sight of everything at this stage is because we need to wait until the comprehensive spending review. Once that spending review has happened, then we can actually make decisions that will affect the people of Dudley. Until then, what we'd be doing was making savings from various departments that at this point could be wiped out when we have the money given to us from central government. So there's no point in us guessing at this point how much money we're going to get in, planning the savings from all the different departments, and then in late November scrapping the lot because we've been given the money by the government. So that was with reference to the majority of the points that you asked, Pete, was the fact that there's no point in us doing it at this point until we've gone through that comprehensive spending review. Now, I believe that we should hear something by the 25th of November when the Chancellor will be delivering his own spending review. As far as the information that we have sent to government and asking them for more help, I would be delighted in getting a copy to you, Pete. No problem at all. But otherwise, until we do receive, I mean, we've just received a further 3.9 million, which, you know, shortens the amount that we've got to find from our overall budget. We're still about 3.4 million short. I'd be delighted that to give you the details as soon as we've got them, Pete, so that they can be scrutinised by the opposition. Thank you, Leader.
Okay, I think I have. Thanks for that, Steve. I have Councillor Zada and then Councillor Ridney.
Thank you for that, Leader. I'm not sure whether my camera's working. It's saying it is and it isn't. So you obviously won't have the pleasure of seeing me tonight if it isn't.
Come on, show us that lovely face.
Other than that, the questions around this budget are obviously, Steve, a couple of questions that I would like some clarity on to start off with, and then obviously very keen to understand why you think last minute planning in a medium term strategy, which gives the opportunity to revise the forecast and obviously revise some of the assumptions that you've put forward, is different in a pandemic versus how we would normally do business. So firstly, I want to be absolutely clear that what you are presenting is a deficit position. You're saying a £2.6 million surplus, and you've decided to spread the burden across a number of years around the losses that have been made and noted in paragraph 6. And I think it's important, or certainly I'd like to think you would think it's important, to have a handle on what those losses look like in its entirety, even though it may necessarily only be a position in October. So I am very surprised that you have come onto this cabinet and you have openly declared that you really have no idea about what these losses look like and how they will be spread and what the impact for local people will be. I'm also concerned, obviously, that you feel that having no strategy is the best strategy, and you ought to wait to hear whether you may get good news or bad news at some point in the future. So I would question why you think that is the way forward. What I'm keen is your assessment of paragraph 21, at which point the independent auditors feel that their further audit may be required and they don't share the level of confidence that you may be exerting on this call, and what your assessment is of that paragraph and what actions will be taken to reassure our independent auditors and obviously the people of Dudley that a council will exist in future years, because actually the viability and the sustainability of Dudley Council is in question by what you have presented to us today. So keen to understand what next. Are you waiting, Steve, for a magic wand to be presented to you, and that is how you intend to take on this responsibility as Cabinet Member for Finance? If so, maybe I could have a word with my friend Harry Potter to see if he can share some wisdom your way. What is the plan? Why is there no strategy, Steve? What are you going to do about it? Why don't you want to talk to the people of Dudley? Why don't you want to share with them the bad news that may come as well as the good news that you envisage? Although from what you're presenting today is that there may not be any good news, and actually the burden may be greater if you haven't planned for the number of years going forward. Thank you, Leader.
I thought you were more friendly with Voldemort, to be honest, Councillor Zada.
Okay, guys. Can
I come back on that one then, please, Leader?
Okay, then, Steve, do you want to answer Councillor Zada first? I've got Councillor Ridley next, then Councillor Foster. You want to do Cadder first?
Yes, please.
Okay, off you go.
Just because, as usual, he's got the figures wrong. We're actually presenting a surplus of 2.6 million in this year's figures. And with the 3.9 million that came in on the 22nd, that works out a surplus of 6.5 million for this year. The reason that we've got to wait, and I believe that it's the right way of doing it, is waiting until we have had the comprehensive spending review, is because if we ask each department to review the way they are doing things and try and make cuts at this point to each department, if then within a month they don't need to make those cuts, then we're completely wasting the time of all of our officers getting that information when we may be able to get some more money from central government. Now, at this point, they've given us another 3.9 million, and I do believe that after the comprehensive spending review, we will get more. Now, with the COVID strategy at the moment, we have been given 21.9 million in unring-fenced grant. That's what we've been given so far, plus this other 3.9 million. We've spent 10 million pounds more than the 21.9 on COVID, which is the area that we've got to get back in order to make sure that the services that we've got can run efficiently and effectively. So that's the reason we need to wait for this review to come up. It's not hiding anything. What we're trying to do is to make everything transparent. And so as soon as we have the figures available, I'm more than happy to share them with the opposition.
Okay, you've finished there, Steve. Okay.
Yeah, I have. Sorry.
Sorry, it's difficult to follow this. Councillor Sue Ridley, then Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Leader. A query, page 16, paragraph 7, bullet points 2 and 3. I'll deal first with the home to school transport. I'm quite concerned that this has appeared now for the last 2 years, cost pressures from the home to school transport. I'm concerned about this because we even had consultants in to try and look at this. What also has rather concerned me is that since March, school transport, the schools were out really till September. Most of the schools were not functioning, so that there should have been less pressure, there should have been less cost. So why are we still seeing this? And my other not a question, a comment really, it saddens me to see this pressures rising from children looked after placements, because we all of us sitting around this table have been on this council long enough to know we have all pledged that we want to have children back in our boroughs. We do not want out of borough placements, which I suggest is probably where these costs are coming from. But these are rising considerably. And what are we going to do about this? This is something that are people outside the borough, the companies making money, or is it just the cost, the increasing complex things that we're having to deal with for our looked after children? So they're not really finance questions, but there are questions that concern me about the rising costs of these services.
Great. Can I come back on that one straight away, Leader, if I may?
Yes, unless Councillor Butchery wants to come in, Steve.
If I can just come in first. Yep. Because I do believe, you know, what we've had here from Children's Services, we've had years of poor management of the Children's Services. We've had both sides, this is both Labour and Conservative, have added to the issue of not being able to get the correct people in position to make Children's Services the place it needs to be. I do believe now we are getting a handle on it. We are eventually I think Ruth is starting to make headway in children's services. This is one area that we are looking at. Whether we put this one of the home to school transport, I mean, I was looking initially putting it under procurement, but I think that this is one area that we should be able to save a lot of money. And I'm unhappy that the mismanagement of the children's services has led to increased costs. So it's an area that we do need to address, and we are addressing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ruth, do you want to come in?
Yeah. Just to
Cheers,
follow
Ruth.
up, Sue.
Yeah.
As you can appreciate, when the pandemic first started and the schools all closed on in March, we had initially it was for 3 weeks. We had no idea how long this was going to go on for. So I think the decision was made that we need to retain a certain amount of home to school transport drivers in case, for when with the sort of anticipating that the schools were going to reopen fairly quickly. So we couldn't sort of let them go off and do other jobs. We had to kind of basically keep them a retaining fee. And then obviously it went on longer than we were obviously aware that this was going to happen. I think nobody knew in March it was going to last for 6 months. Otherwise we'd have done things differently. But this has gradually evolved over the months, as you're very much aware. And then when there was an issue with some of the home to school transport that they were then saying, well, we're furloughed, so we need to be paid, and it was who it was sort of paid by, and I think in the end the council ended up paying it. So you're right, we haven't had children really in school for 6 months, but we've still had to pay the drivers for their, like a lot of other people were furloughed as well, and also with the aspiration that we were going to get the children back into school, so we needed the transport as and when that was ready. The looked after placements, that's a combination of more children coming into care through the pandemic, and also you're absolutely right, market forces, because there's a pandemic, there are some very mercenary people out there, and if you've got some children to place, in an emergency situation on a Friday, it's always at awkward times. It's very hard to go out to market and get a best price. So it is something we're very much looking at. We are bringing more children back into the borough. I can assure you of that, absolutely. But these are a mixture of, as Steve said, issues that haven't been resolved properly through the years, but also add COVID into it, and it's been a real issue. However, I've got a meeting in the next week or so, I think, with Steve and Indy to look at the home to school transport, and like Steve says, whether we look at actually moving it into procurement or somewhere like that, which might be a much better option. And obviously we're constantly looking, Helen and I, the SEND team has done incredibly well recently. Excuse me, it's not COVID, it's just cough. It's done really well with the SEND team recently, and we're now sort of working our way through the system, obviously just after so we've just got through COVID, got the children back in the school, and we're sort of working our way through the list. So I can assure you those are absolutely on our radar at the moment, and I hope that answers your question. Okay.
And Sue, we're very happy to keep you updated of that.
Oh yeah, I think
progress.
I've got a meeting. Yeah, I think I've got a meeting with you next week, Sue, anyway,
yeah,
with Helen as well, so we can go through that in more detail then, if that's okay with you.
Can I just ask you one more question, Steve?
Of course you can.
Yeah.
Steve, go on.
The Successor Program, I noticed the costs have gone up, and I'm really being ever so polite about this, because I know I've nagged you to death about this program, and I don't apologise for that, because it is needed. Is that due to delays in training because of staff not being in the buildings themselves?
Do you know that one, Ruth?
I can answer that, Steve. It goes live on the 16th of November. And I think because adults has already gone live, children's goes live on the 16th of November. And I think it was more around the structure of it than the training. All the training's being done by the staff pretty much now. I know it's being cascaded through. So that's all ready to go. I think there was other issues, sort of IT issues earlier on, that meant that there were delays. But it is the go live is the 16th of November, and we're not delaying it. Okay.
Yeah.
I think also
Yeah.
as soon as we get a new director in place,
Yeah.
then we can make
Yeah.
sure from both sides that he or she is quizzed, and we make sure we tie them down to make sure this department is working a lot more effective than it has been over the last 5-10 years, because there are so many issues. It's been a long saga of poor management.
Because I presume the consultants for the home and school are in that £500,000 that's shown there on page 22.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you all for those contributions. Right, I've got Councillor Foster next, then Councillor Kieran Casey.
Thank you, Chair. My question again is to Councillor Clark, and it's, if I can draw your attention, Steve, to paragraph 19, and you do acknowledge that although there are in-year surpluses which will buy some time.
Sorry, did you say that again?
There are in-year surpluses that will buy you time this year, in this financial year.
Circuses, you say?
Well, you say that additional. You've had funding. You mentioned a 6 million figure of so that you don't have to tap into.
Oh, surplus, right? Okay, yeah.
Yeah. You are acknowledging in that paragraph that early next year there could be real pressures. My question is, in terms of the case that you're making to government and the comprehensive spending review, and I hope this is obvious in the letters and the correspondence that you're going to provide to Councillor Lowe, that you are still in support of a fair deal for Dudley, which I would hope would help to alleviate some of the pressures brought about by the pandemic. But of course, we know from before the pandemic that there's a need to deal with ongoing pressures faced by Dudley because of underfunding. So my question to you is, first of all, are you still committed to a fair deal for Dudley and to making that case, as we have done in the past, both as Labour and Conservative administrations, and in partnership?
Yep, I'll come back to that one. Yes, I am committed completely to the fair deal for Dudley. However, I don't think we're going to have any feedback in time for literally this year. So sorry, before the end of the year. So that's reason we've got to wait for the comprehensive spending review, because the fair deal for Dudley really is being pushed, or what do they say, the can kick down the road, it seems to be. We need to keep pushing that on behalf of Dudley, but at this point we're not going to get any feedback from that for these immediate figures. Kieran, is it next? Kieran.
Yeah, it's just Kieran. Off you go, Kieran.
Thanks, leader. Yeah, just a question to yourself, Stephen. It really comes back to the point, because I think it's really important that Pete and Kadar made at the start of this agenda item, really, about particularly around the scrutiny and engagement process that would normally occur at this time. I mean, obviously, we know at the minute times are extremely difficult for people, for organisations, for businesses across the borough, with further hard times to come, it seems. And I can understand the points you make, Steve, in terms of this being, an item in terms of the middle of a pandemic. But I think this is, for me, a basic question of openness and engagement. And I think it's really important that we have that discussion with the people of the borough, the organisations, the businesses that are on the front line at the minute and that are really worried about what's to come. They're essential to the local economy, to local people and the services that we rely on. So I personally, like colleagues, don't understand why this is being delayed. I also don't think that the argument that you put across, Steve, holds much weight in terms of if officers do the work now, it's got to be changed. For me, if the work is started now, it can have that base position to start with that can be amended as and when is needed, if that information, if that good news comes, if the bad news comes. But it is at least a base position to start with. So I don't think that argument holds much weight. And I think, again, for me, this is a basic question of openness, engagement and consultation with the people and the organisations that are essential to our borough. So I really do think that, you know, it needs to be looked at again, Stephen. You know, we need some clearer and more information on that personally. Thank you.
No problem. I'll come back straight back on that. One of my answers was not quite right. I mean, what we have got is the officers are doing the work. What I was concerned about was I don't want to be scaring individuals saying various departments will be cut, various budgets will be cut. The officers have done the work and they are doing the work. So I apologise about misleading you there. They are and have been doing the work, but there is no point in me releasing that out to everybody else to scrutinise at this point until we know whether the figures are literally correct and the money that we are going to receive from the government is more or less, because we have spent too much on COVID at this point. So the books need to balance, and so there's no point in me making draconian savings if that is the case until we actually know the correct figures. So I'm not prepared to go down that route, even though the officers have been doing the background work. So Councillor Casey, you are quite right in saying we do need the base, and we have got that base. I misled you when I spoke a bit earlier, but we have got that information. But there's no point in me scaring various departments until such times as we actually know the facts. Hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you, Steve. I've got other hands up, but they are people who've already contributed, so I do intend to move on now. My line of thought on this is Steve is absolutely right. It is pointless scrutinising something that isn't there yet. Opposition members and indeed our own group members and scrutiny committees and partners will all have adequate time to scrutinise the budget contents as and when we know what that settlement from central government is. But I do take note of the comments and I welcome all the contributions from members. Is that report agreed?
Yes.
No.
Okay.
Aye.
Thank you, members.
Yes.
Moving on to agenda item 7. Brierley Hill High Street Heritage Action Zone and Dudley Town Centre Townscape Heritage Programme, pages 26 to 28. It's the Ian Kettle and I forgot the name of the officer now.
Vicky.
It's Ian and Vicky show. Okay, over to you guys.
Hello there, Pat. Thank you. This is to update the Cabinet on the delegation procedure for the administration of grants awarded under the Dudley Townscape Heritage Programme, funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund, and to seek Cabinet approval for the delegation procedure for the administration of grants awarded under the Brierley Hill High Street Heritage Action Zone, funded by Historic England. It is recommended that the Cabinet confirm that the Director of Regeneration and Enterprise, in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Regeneration and Enterprise, is authorised to prepare criteria, conduct negotiations with applicants and issue grants for the Dudley Townscape Heritage Programme, and also authorise the Director of Regeneration and Enterprise, in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Regeneration and Enterprise, to prepare criteria, conduct negotiations with applicants and issue grants for the Brierley Hill High Street Heritage Action Zone. Thank you, Leader. Any comments?
Thank you very much, Councillor Kettle. Any comments or contributions or questions from members? Can't see any hands coming up. Okay, is that report then agreed?
Yep.
Okay, thank you, members.
Aye.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 8, approving the supplemental, excuse me, deed of variation to the Black Country Joint Executive Committee collaboration, pages 29 to 60. Again, over to Ian and I think Vicky again. Thank you.
Vicky, you want to come in on this?
Do you want me to come in, Councillor Kettle? It's Paul Mountford.
Okay, Paul,
Yeah.
come on in then.
Cheers,
Yeah.
Paul.
All on this one.
Yeah, I can present this one. Thank you, Leader. Yeah, at the 6th of January 2020 Cabinet, approval was given to widen the scope of the Black Country Joint Executive Joint Committee to include all funds that were administered by the Black Country LEP. At that meeting, it was agreed that a further report would be brought back to Cabinet for consideration, setting out the governance arrangements for the Black Country Enterprise Zones, which includes the DY5 Enterprise Zone. This report therefore sets out the proposed governance arrangements at Appendix B, and also seeks approval by Cabinet to enter into a supplemental deed of variation to the Black Country Joint Executive Committee Collaboration Agreement, which will include going forward the governance and oversight of the Black Country Enterprise Zone. The governance principles are set out in Appendix B, which includes the financial model and assumptions and priorities for funding for both surplus and non-surplus generating enterprise zone sites, as well as the potential to fund non-enterprise zone sites. It has been agreed that DY5 Enterprise Zone historic revenue costs of $571,000 will be prioritised for payment, as this formed part of the original DY5 Enterprise Zone Memorandum of Understanding. Future revenue costs of $250,000 per annum for 5 years, commencing in 2020-21, are also proposed for Black Country local authorities to support the activity within the individual enterprise zones, as well as developing Black Country priority schemes. Therefore, it is recommended for Cabinet provides authority for the Council to enter into the supplemental deed of variation, and also delegates authority to the Chief Executive in consultation with the Deputy Chief Executive to conduct any negotiations and to make any minor amendments. Thank you, Leader.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Thank you, Ian. I did see another hand up. It's disappeared. Okay, Kershid first. Off you go, Kershid.
Thank you, Leader. I got no issues with the approving of the supplementary deed, but I think it's important to note there's plenty of risks in this report. Those are highlighted in particular in paragraph 11 and 12. And we just need to be mindful of the borrowings and make sure that those prudent assessments are being carried out. I mean, it also talks about the council's need to mitigate the risks, and I'm just wondering if any of our projects where they have been re-evaluated and any risks have been identified, and how we're going to deal with those risks, and if there are any, then it'll be good to know which of those projects that we've assessed and made sure that we're mitigating and doing our duties. Also, paragraph 28, it is nice to see that that's in there on page 35. It obviously gives us some assurance that we can make decisions ourselves should we want to on some of the items. And let's hope that if those circumstances do arise, that we as a Cabinet, all the officers, won't hesitate if it's in the benefit of the Dudley people. Thank you, Leader.
Okay, thank you, Kershid. Points noted, and I'm sure the officers and Ian can get back to you when you have your briefings, etc. Any other comment? I can't see any other hands up on this particular issue, this report. Therefore, is the report agreed by colleagues?
Yes, Leader.
Okay, yes. Thank you very much. Agenda item 9 is Housing Allocations Working Group. Age designations on the low-rise flats, pages 61 to 76, and I call upon Laura Taylor and Paul Davis.
Thank you, Leader. As part of the review into the allocations policy, the working group have considered the need to remove the age designations from our low-rise flatted stock. After a lot of consideration, the working group agreed to the recommendations which are before you now. So I put the report to the Cabinet.
Okay, thank you, Laura. I have Councillor Barnett. Chris, you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Leader. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely, Chris, far away.
Good. Okay. So I was part of that working group, and I haven't got an issue with the age restriction on the low-rise flats per se. However, an issue has been brought to my attention. I think that we should pay some attention to it. If we look at page 62, we can see that agenda item 9, paragraph 4 states that this policy is open to challenge on equality grounds. Now, the Equality Act of 2010, Part 4, Section 32, says quite literally, with regards to premises, this part does not apply to the following protected characteristics: age. So it's incorrect to say that the policy is open to challenge on equality grounds with respect to age. Agenda item 9, paragraph 8, goes on a little bit further. It says that the council has a duty to eliminate discrimination. Obviously, that goes without saying, doesn't it? And it is very true, but not for age, as is stated in the second bullet point of the paragraph. What I'm saying here is that, you know, as I said, I haven't got a problem with the agenda item, but it seems to me there are some factually incorrect statements, and you know, this is a public document, and it should be factually correct. Thank you, Leader.
Okay, thank you very much. Chris. I think I've got Councillor Laura Taylor or Paul Davies ready to come in to answer that question directly. Over to you guys.
If I can, Leader, for you, I mean that equality impact assessment and the report was drawn up with our lawyers' input, so I'll need to go away and double check that. But clearly, you know, the advice there is that it does discriminate, particularly against women and women of childbearing age, which may be the age bit that came in. It discriminates against women because they're more likely to have children and or during pregnancy. So it quite clearly was an issue that we needed to address. This is the first issue really that's come out of the working group, and it's come into Cabinet ahead of the rest of the policy review, which will continue through the working group because of the legislative angle on it. But I can double check, but that was drawn up by a lawyer, so I'll get a second opinion. Thank you, Leader.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Any other comments or questions on this report? Can't see any hands. So is this report agreed?
Yes, Leader. Yes.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. Agenda item 10 is to report on any issues arriving from scrutiny committees, and I do have one. It's worth reporting verbally tonight that under agenda item 10, that a special meeting of the Cabinet has been arranged for Monday the 23rd of November 2020 at 6 p.m. to consider a report from the Health and Adult Social Care Scrutiny Committee on the Council and Partner response to the COVID-19 pandemic. This will enable the report and any recommendations to go before the full Council on, and it's just disappeared again, on November the 30th. Any other issues arising from scrutiny committees?
No other issues, Leader, no.
Okay, thank you, Steve. And then finally, number 11, to consider any questions from members to the Leader where 2 clear days notice has been given to the monitoring officer, Cabinet Procedure Rule 2.5.
None, Leader.
Okay, well, thank you all colleagues for attending tonight, and I wish you well for the rest of the evening, and thank you. Sorry, I also declare the meeting closed. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you. Good night.